Welcome back to the afternoon session of our Keep the Conversations Going festival and fundraiser. We're delighted to have you back with us, and we have an exciting next few segments set up. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that you can pledge your support to help save Theatre Maker and keep the conversations going at theatremaker.ie/donate. Now, I'm delighted to welcome Lucy Ryan, Director of Programming and Finance from Smock Alley Theatre, to our festival program. Hi, Lucy. How are you keeping?
Good, thank you. Yeah, delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're joining us. And as I said before, you're joining us from the main space at Smock Alley.
That's right.
Benches.
Yeah, we've been open for the last couple of weeks. We're open at a limited capacity, but we've managed to do, this is our fourth week of programming. So yeah, we're open and delighted to welcome audiences back.
Fantastic. Well, we're delighted to see the Dublin Fringe program and the shows that have already been both live streaming and recording at Smock. Mm-hmm. There's been a wealth of shows and productions. There we go. Fabulous. Well, I'd love to kick off because we heard the announcement of Seen and Heard. The call-out's been put out. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're really delighted. I mean, I'm just speaking on behalf of Smock, but Seen and Heard is run by Cleana Dukes and Caoimhe Connolly. As always, this year, 2022, will be the 6th year of Seen and Heard. We were unable to run a festival last year in 2021. This year, 2021. And we were delighted to be able to get in just under the radar last year. We finished at the end of February 2020 with our most successful festival yet. So the call out has gone out. You can find all of the details on our website, smockalley.com. And we are looking for anyone, any artist, musician, performer, writer, spoken word artist. The whole principle behind Seen and Heard is that it is a festival of work in progress. And the idea is that it's a contract between you, the artist, and the work that you're making, and the audience that you present it to. And there is the feedback from the audience is a crucial part of the festival itself. So the idea is that you get to try out new ideas, get to try out new work, get to show what you're thinking about doing, and then you get a direct response back from the audience. So that's the kind of principle behind Seen and Heard. Back in 2020, we had 400 artists. We made 109 shows, and we sold more tickets than we had before. So it's a really great festival. This year, we're looking. The call out's gone out. As I say, we're looking for new voices. We're looking for new work. We're looking for new disciplines. We want people to think and imagine, and to, everyone's had this 18 months to reevaluate what's important to them, what they want to talk about, what their work is about, what maybe their practice has evolved. And so Seen and Heard is there to let you have a platform for your work. So, as I say, everything is on our website, and you can, there's a whole list of really helpful FAQs there. And also the deadline is the 3rd of October. So it's midnight on the 3rd of October. So you've got a good 6 weeks to think up your idea and then make your submission. So we're looking forward to receiving as many as possible.
It's so exciting. We just had a conversation with Dr. Sarah, oh my goodness, her last name is escaping, Hoover from NUIG. She's a PhD researcher there. And we were talking about the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary arts and the sort of interconnectedness of the, oh my goodness, I'm losing all my words. But the joy of Smock's role in promoting essentially the space within which to explore your practice with other artists, it's invaluable.
Yeah, and we're often the very first sort of professional opportunity for theatre makers. And Seen and Heard is often the first place that they've managed to, outside a context of maybe university or student or amateur dramatics, that people have had the opportunity to put their work out in front of an audience and get the experience of that production experience of working to a deadline, raising a little bit of funding, doing your marketing, creating your copy, and then obviously the rehearsal room and making the work itself, and then the technical side of thing, and then the actual kind of a presentation, and then ensure that you find your audience. So that whole journey of making work, from the beginning idea of you just sitting, in your room deciding to write a play about something, or you're working with your friends and devising a piece that speaks to a certain emotion or whatever it is. That whole journey, Seen and Heard, can take you on that, and it's often really, really valuable experience for people. So we see Seen and Heard in particular as a place for emerging artists in that way, but we also see it as a place for more established artists to experiment with ideas and to try out new ideas and to try out new work. And that might be trying out a collaboration. Maybe it's a dance artist that wants to work with a musician and they want to try out whether that works. And so Seen and Heard is a really great place or great forum for doing that. Or similarly, you might have written a play in the past, but now you want to move into the spoken word territory. Or, so it can often be about more established artists trying a new direction. And so it's very much a good forum for that too.
Completely. The room to fail, I think, is something that we need as artists in order to grow. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Seen and Heard is one of the primary places and opportunities in Dublin where there is that freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I think all artists are brave, and all artists are brave to put their work in front of an audience. But as you say, try, fail better, as the famous quote goes. It's always a very supportive atmosphere here. The team, as I say, Cliona Dukes and Caoimhe Connolly, look after the artist really well. And as you go through the process of making your work ready for stage, there are lots of other supports. There's some dramaturgical supports. There can be technical supports. There's producer workshops. There's other opportunities of artists to meet each other. If your show is missing a lighting designer, then there are opportunities for you to meet a bunch of lighting designers and technicians, one of whom might gel for you, and that works for your show. So it's very supportive in that way, in bringing people together and helping them make their work. And as you say, to help them make the mistakes and then learn from the mistakes.
Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing. And the amount of marketing support as well. That's stuff you don't as an actor. I have dabbled into writing, and the idea even of producing my own show is so daunting, that to have the support of not only a space but a team to help you move forward in that.
Yeah, and the reality is, I mean, it would all be brilliant if you could just write a play or just and then it just magically happens. But we all know that that's not the case, and particularly when you start out, you're often the creator and the actor and the director and the marketer and the producer and the technician on your show, or you've designed the poster, or you're borrowing the props from your own living room. All that kind of stuff happens. So it's just trying to help people learn the skills that they need to make that happen. And there's no point pretending that there'll always be a marketing department behind you to pick up your show and make it sell to the world. Each artist has to do a bit of that work themselves. So it's just sort of helping with that, really.
Definitely. Well, I'd love to chat about you have a resident company, Fight to Flight. Is that correct? Yeah. And then a resident artist as well. So Sonia Kelly, Claire Monelly. Oh, I can't remember everyone, but it's...
Well, I'll start with the resident. I'll start with Sonia Kelly's residency, actually. So that was an artist in residency that we applied for funding from the Arts Council and Dublin City Council. And Sonia joined us in the summer of last year. So we were already in lockdown. And throughout the residency, Sonia has created this really brilliant template, which I think we're going to use going forward. We've been calling it the Round Table. And what it essentially is that Sonia has been mentoring 5 up-and-coming writers, Claire Monelly, Aisling O'Mara, Keith James Walker, Sean, Shane O'Reilly, and Erica Murray, basically. And the five of them over the past year have been doing these roundtable sessions with Sonia. And these sessions, they've been focusing obviously on writing and on developing your own work, but they've also been focused on what it means to be a writer and to make that professional pledge to yourself to say, I will write every day. I am a writer. This is my craft. How do you develop your craft? How do you develop the resilience to maintain that position to maintain being a writer in your own life? Because there's so many other responsibilities, or it can be quite difficult to carve out the time to be the writer that you want to be. So Sonia was leading them through this program where and it was very casual. Most of it happened on Zoom because of the times that we live in, and particularly as it was happening over the winter and we weren't able to have people here in the building. But it was really helpful for the five roundtable participants because they just got to focus on what it is, on their own working practices. So it was a very positive experience. So it was a paid mentorship, so that meant the artists were paid for their time. But there was no expectation. So we weren't saying, we want to play at the end of this, or, please show us all your work. It was just about supporting those five artists through the mentorship. So it was a really good way of passing on Sonia's skills, particularly when the rest of the building has been closed. So that's been a really, really positive residency. And we're going to follow the model again for the next residency, which is going to be with a producing residency with Kate Ferris. And she's going to do the same thing. She's going to share roundtables with up and coming emerging producers. So it's a good model, and we're hoping to replicate it going forward. And then our residency with Fight to Flight, Peter Gowan, who's a well-established actor here in Ireland and the UK. And he had come actually before I'd even started with SMOC with this idea of a residency. He has a number of plays that he's written himself. And he was originally scheduled to do the first one, Chronicles of Ogle, in the boys' school in April 2020. So that obviously couldn't happen. But Peter stuck with it and stuck with us. And then when we were reopening this just back now in the first week of August, I was really keen to reopen with that show. So we did 2 weeks of the Chronicles of Ogle here in the main space with a socially distant audience and limited numbers. But it was really positive, and it's been a really fantastic experience. And what Peter had did with this, and he did this in conjunction with ITI and us, and they'll be available online. We held because he did a 2-week run. On each Friday morning, we had we called the Friday Forums. On both days, we looked at, he called them, When Am I an Actor? And essentially, we were asking actors, first of all, of an older generation, and in the second week of a younger generation, what they do to build resilience in what is a very stressful and very peripatetic and often very stop-start a career and working practices. And it was a really, really helpful and engaging conversation. It was just an open chat, really. We had a couple of panelists in each day, and then we had the participation of a mindfulness expert who came in and just gave people techniques to how to manage times of stress due to not working, or due to and also how to manage stress due to disappointment if you feel you were up for a role and then you didn't get the role. That kind of reality of that sort of of being a working actor. So it was really helpful. ITI, we filmed them here, and ITI are going to put them out on their YouTube channels in the next couple of weeks. So they'll be there to be shared. And so when Peter comes back with his next show, which we're hoping to do in the late spring of 2022, we'll hold more of these Friday forums to just be an opportunity for people. I mean, they're absolutely free. You can just sign up for a seat and come and join us, and just to have a discussion about really what it is to be a working artist in Ireland today.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting title as well, because most artists I know over the last year and a half have really branched out and given time to different practices. So it's important to sort of uh, uplift those aspects of your work. So being, you know, an actor or a producer or a director, to give time and space to your practice.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And it
Yeah.
strikes me too that like the overwhelm that comes with the multi-hyphenate artist career, Smock is giving tools and tips and support to make that seem less daunting.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear about your not community outreach, but I suppose chats with artists who are maybe struggling on the producing side of things or the marketing side of things. How do those conversations go if someone cold calls you and says, I have a show, what is the next step? You know, or I have a team, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and it happens a lot. And always happy to answer the questions. I mean, I think there's certainly when I first entered the sector, I suppose, a long time ago, 25 years ago, and I was working in London, and you know, in those days, sort of the idea that the writer handed over a play, and then the venue took that play and made it happen, and the writer would turn up to rehearsals and then go up to the opening night, you know, or even that the actor would be handed a play and said, now you perform that role. Now that happens a bit more often, but the reality is nowadays, and not just here in Ireland, you know, across the UK, most artists are making their own work, and they're making their own work happen, because if they don't make it happen, it's not going to happen. And so venues like Smock and the other venues, you know, want that content, but we too are limited in our resources in terms of, you know, we can't, you know, immediately just take the play in and work, you know, throw all the resources behind it. So we're looking for teams that are engaged and want to work together, want to collaborate, and want to make the work happen, because that's kind of key. So yeah, you know, when people come to me and say, I've written a play, will you put it on? You know, you have to say, well, let's take it several steps back. You know, there are various models of doing that. And Smock can be both you can both rent the space straight out and get 100% of the box office, or we can look at doing a split. But, you know, an actual production, for an in-house production, we haven't been able to afford to do those for several years. And we're looking at doing sort of a co-production model. Sort of we have the funding to do sort of one or two of those a year. So really what the kind of format that how work would get made, either in the main space or in the boys' school once it reopens again, you know, is looking at some kind of supportive box office split, so that we can support the project with our marketing team and a little bit of our tech team, and then, you know, we split the box office on that. Or, you know, that's usually how it's going to work. So whatever team comes in, they need to be prepared to be doing the work and to do the rehearsals and to make the work and bring it in ready to go. So that's the kind of format that we look at. So knowing that that's how it works, and that's how we work, and how most other, you know, venues are working and festivals are working, then really it's obvious then to and that's where Seen and Heard came from. It's sort of giving people the skills to make that happen, and giving people the skills to, really importantly, to think about their audience. Who is this for? Who are you making the show for? Who is going to buy the ticket other than your mum and your flatmates and your cousins or whoever? You know, what has it got to say? What have you got to say? And does the audience want to hear that? And so that really got crucial question about how your work relates to an audience. For me as a venue manager, it's absolutely critical, because we have to find the audience for your work. And I know, you know, this is all over the Arts Council. Everybody knows that the Arts Council, you know, they're making good work strategy, is making great work strategy, is, you know, artists and audiences combined. So I think it's really important for emerging artists to be considering that at every step of the way. And that's from the moment that the idea pops into their head and say, oh, I'm going to write a play about this, or I'm going to do a spoken word piece about this, or I want to devise on this theme. And it's going, well, what is it going to say to your audience? And what have you got to say about it? So yeah, I think any of these programs that we've been doing, and they're all at different levels, Seen and Heard can be an emerging artist. Our roundtable artists that we did with Sonia Kelly, they're a bit more experienced. A lot of them have come through Seen and Heard, and Sonia herself is an enormously experienced artist. So there's all different levels, but those principles remain. And what we're trying to do with these various programs, we've got 2 other programs running at the moment. One is for Black Irish theatre makers, and one is our boys' school development program, which is an interesting one in particular because we've been funded to give companies to pay them to bring their company in, and up to 6 actors, performers, tech support, and the venue in the boys' school for a week to make new work. And again, that's about giving people the resources to develop their skills to make better work, to eventually end up in front of a paying audience. So yeah, it's a self-sustaining loop, I hope.
It sounds, yeah, exactly. If you give people if you teach a man to fish, they'll fish for a day, something like that.
A lot of fishing going on in here, yeah.
Well, that sounds amazing. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact that SMOC was opening up pretty much before anyone else to have people record within the spaces, and talking about audience engagement. How were those conversations? Because your audience isn't in-house. So how does that change the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. We opened for 2 or 3 weeks just before the Fringe last year, and we did 3 weeks of shows, and again to a limited audience. We were like, great, and then suddenly that second wave came, and we were like closed down again, and we were like, oh, just when we thought we were getting going. And at that moment, there was the conversation about digital had started, and people were beginning to talk about this live streaming and all of this kind of thing. So there was a fund available through the Department of Arts and Culture about basically it was a kind of capital fund. So we applied and were granted the funding to purchase 2 broadcast grade cameras and a switcher, and basically we sort of advanced into our the idea of live streaming work. And the very first thing that we did, and we live streamed, and then obviously we had the recording, was Ty Kicky's In One Eye Out the Other, which is this really gorgeous piece which had played in SMOC previously and had been part of First Fortnight. It had been a Fringe winner, and is now currently on in Edinburgh, in virtual Edinburgh, that recording.
I think that's until the 30th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, really great. And Ty people may know Ty Kicky through his Twitter following. He's been putting up these
his videos.
Yeah, really
They're
brilliant. He's a great artist, and actually he's joining us on one of our boys' school development program weeks in a couple of weeks to develop some new work. So
wonderful.
Yeah, so we recorded that and we live streamed it, and we were all absolutely terrified, like we had no idea what was going to happen. So it was a really first experience for us all, but we couldn't believe it. We sold over 400 tickets, which is the equivalent of the boys' school for a week, and that for us was astonishing that there was an audience out there, and so it kind of gave us an appetite that we understood that we could do it, and now obviously everyone else has been doing it too, and people do it in different formats and different ways. We did a live stream of the RT Concert Orchestra, a Baroque concert just before Christmas, which was really beautiful, and it was really great for us to work with Lyric FM on that as well. And then in March, we did it slightly differently. We didn't live stream, but we recorded a version of Camille Lucy Ross's Big Bobby, Little Bobby, which had been on before in SMOC. And that was more of a filmed performance, but that went out and sold similar amounts of tickets to Tigers. And so it was really, we realized that there is an audience out there, but it's not for everyone, and not every artist is prepared to go down the route of live streaming or recording their work, and that's to be respected, actually. And so it's not every show you can't automatically just throw a camera up in every show and say, right, we're going to do it. So but it's been a really good learning curve for us over the last year, just what is possible. And I think going forward, this issue of a digital ticket is very present and very current. And I think as we reopen, we recorded Chronicles of Ogle, Peter Gowan's show. We didn't stream it, but we have recorded it, so we'll have it for future use. I think in future there's this balance between a live ticket and a digital ticket, a live seat or a live ticket into the show, and then also a digital ticket to watch something being live streamed or recorded, or you watch it afterwards. Is going to be the new normal, actually. So it's good to be taking the time to work on that, to learn how to do it this year. I've gone slightly off, haven't I?
Oh, no, but it increases access, like the reach of the productions. It just increases tenfold. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the experience of, listening to other people. I know Druid with Sonia's Once Upon a Bridge, and obviously with their Chekhov Seagull. And I actually worked on a freelance capacity on Marina Cars to the Lighthouse and the Everyman in the summer. The reach is extraordinary. We had audiences for across the US for Marina's work. I know that something like 16 different countries tuned in to see the INO short 50 shots of opera. So that's really exciting that you can reach, that Irish work can reach that far, and that's got to be something that has to be nurtured and preserved. It's very exciting, the reach.
Well, and at SMOC, as the oldest theatre in Dublin, to then be on the sort of the front edge of the newest technology in which to share theatre, and part of those conversations is there. Obviously, you had the grant that allowed you to get the equipment, but how are the conversations around pushing those boundaries of exploring the possibilities of digital performance?
And I think we've seen loads of different versions of it now over the last year. I think it's really exciting what people are doing. I mean, last DTF we had Dead Centres to Be a Machine, which was totally, for me, it was really exciting in terms of playing with the idea of what it means to be a digital audience. But we've had recordings, we've had streamed, we've had live streamed, we've streamed over a period, of 5 days. Interactive work, which is really interesting. One of the artists I've been talking to, who's been working here in the Baptiste program, was talking about, putting a GoPro camera on performers and filming that. And you've had that, was it Broken Talkers who do that cool thing with the camera, the 360-degree camera? So
that was Pan? Was that Pan? What is the word?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, no, really, The Last Bad Man.
Is that what I can't remember the title, but again, just people having a lot of fun playing with those ideas on how you reach your audience. And I mean, there's none of this is to say that the unique experience of sitting here in the stalls in SMOC and having a performer not more than 2 meters away from you, but in creating that sense of shared space, that's still very unique, and that's not always captured in a live stream experience. But there are other ways to innovate the performance going forward, and I think all of it's to be welcomed. And I'm not a purist in this at all. Anyway, it's kind of the wild west, isn't it? What you can do with a camera in the stage. And I don't think anyone's pretending that why don't you just put it on Netflix or just make a film? I've worked in film as well. There are two entirely different disciplines, and no one's trying to say we're making a movie here. What you're trying to do is use the camera in a really interesting way to add to the narrative and the texture of the theatrical performance that you're creating, basically, or something like that.
Definitely. Yeah, it strikes me with recorded performances, such as Chronicles of Ogle, the fact that it hasn't been live streamed, but it exists in a digital form. There's something both exciting and also, personally, as an actor who loves the fizzle of being able to share the same breath as someone on stage, or being in the audience of that, you're like, that the entity of a digital copy of that work just feels, there's such a contradiction in me that I know that that's the future of the way we communicate our performances, because
it's one of the futures. It's not the only future, it's one of the futures. And there's this, the National Studio in London, they have this really amazing archive of all the shows that the National Theatre has done, and they've got a recording, and it's an incredible resource. But they're the shaky back of the stalls, one set up recording of the show. But it's incredible that all that work that was, that really amazing work from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago has been captured somewhere. So there is a record of it somewhere. It's just sitting in the dusty library in London. That each company and each venue can now create high quality versions of the work for reference, or to sell tickets on, or to learn from, or for me that's a positive. But as I say, it's not taking over from the live performance. It's just going to be beside it, running concurrently.
Yeah. No, it is brilliant to be able to reference. To be able to reference, and the amount that we've had access to now because everyone is taking that step is absolutely brilliant. Well, I'd love to ask you, transitioning from the amazing work SMOC is doing and the hand it has in promoting new work and new voices in Ireland, I'd love to chat with you about what you're thinking about. So we were chatting with Julie Kelleher a couple episodes ago on Stage Door Live, and she was talking to us about, instead of asking people what they're working on, what process are you in, what project is keeping your mind busy, she wanted to create the space to ask, what are you thinking about? And so I would like to pose that question to you.
I mean, right now, what I'm thinking about is writing my Arts Council application, which is due in like 4 weeks' time. So that's the kind of, but really, I mean, what I'm thinking about, it's difficult. I mean, I have to, I'm looking to secure the future for SMOC, and that might sound like a big and dramatic statement, but all art centres, all venues, all companies, we all remain in a really perilous position. All we need is another bloody variant to come down the road and really blow us out of the water. So, that battle hasn't gone away. And with a venue like SMOC, where we rely a lot on commercial income from ticket sales, but also from the use of our banquet hall, our event space, that's precarious to say the least. It's been fairly scary the last 18 months. So, preserving the future of the building itself and its heritage, but also, so that's kind of that's the thing that keeps me awake at night. But coming from that is ensuring that there is enough, ensuring that that the artists are there to make the work happen. And again, that's precarious because a lot of people have just had to, throw their arms up and go, I'm not going back into the sector. It was perilous and difficult in the first place before you plonked an enormous pandemic in the middle of it. Will we have lost a generation of artists and makers who just decided it's too hard to make work? So, rethinking the future in terms of how do we let's not go back to how it all was before. And before we did this, I just came off the NCFA meeting there prior to their discussions with the government. And, we're so lucky to have that team who are fighting our corner at the highest table, because, they are securing the future for the arts here in Ireland so that we don't go back to where we were before and settle with what we had. So that kind of big macro piece is really important and, worth fighting for, to try and I want to say sustainable. I mean, the model isn't particularly sustainable in the sense that we'll always need funding, and we'll always need Arts Council support to make work. But that's no bad thing. But it's just ensuring that the ground is, what am I trying to say? We're just ensuring that we have enough starting points for artists so that they agree to commit and to tell their stories in the theatre as opposed to telling their stories in other ways. So that's what I'm thinking about, as well as the Arts Council application.
That's a lot, but it totally makes sense, because thinking about a future for a building in a facility such as Smock, which has such a long history. Um, yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's just a lot of other there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and it's keeping everyone in tune with what it is that you're trying to do, and trying to map out what that vision for the next 350 years for this building could be, and then bringing everyone along with you on that journey. That's the success that's what success looks like here at Smock, is if we continue to be a centre of activity for the arts going forward, in the next, let's keep it short, in the next 20, 25 years, let alone the next 350 years.
So what, 1592, is that right?
1662 was the first building.
Little off.
But what I love about that story is that Dublin was absolutely tiny. The population of Dublin in 1662 within the walls was something like 8,000 people. And what I love about that is that those 8,000 people came together and decided what they wanted to do was they wanted to build a theatre. And it was it was extremely expensive when it was built, and it was massively, but they were very proud of it. And it was this stone built building that was there for the theatre, and it thrived for the next 150 years. It fell down a few times and had to be rebuilt, and there was various fires and all the various dramas, and got closed for being censored and all this sort of thing. But it was there. It was absolutely at the centre of cultural life for George in Dublin, and that period of School for Scandal and the Rivals and Congreve and Sheridan and George Farquhar and all of that time, really was the centre of cultural life, and people came every night, just 2 or 3 times a week, just to see the same play and hear the songs and have the chats and have the kind of political discussions on stage. And there were riots, and there was, people got upset, and all, people fell in love, and people had fights and duels, and the whole, it was great.
It sounds like it was doing its job.
Yeah, basically it was. So for us going forward, to do our job, then we need to be doing all those things and being a bit disruptive and asking difficult questions and being challenging, but also reflecting the world back to people and reflecting Dublin back to Dubliners. So.
And start having some fights and duels.
Yeah,
break out our sabers and throw some gloves down.
Yeah, we could do that.
That'll be the next show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Lucy, thank you so much. This has been an inspiring and lovely chat. And thank you for taking the time to join us as part of our festival.
Not at all, and good luck with it.
Thank you so much. We'll link to the Seen and Heard call out in our socials, and we'll definitely share on social media. I know so many people that were like buzzing, they were so excited when that came out.
We got a lot of love on social media when we went out there, and I think it's just a really positive sign. So yes, that's it's coming back. Throw in your idea, have a think, get the gang together, busk up some ideas, and think laterally. Think, what has these 18 months taught you about yourself and your work and your practice as an artist, and let's share that. So looking forward to it.
I can't wait. I've got it in my calendar already.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, you definitely will. Take care, and thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that was a lovely chat with Lucy there. That was delightful. So we are going to move on. We have, after Lucy, I've dropped my cards. Oh, we have a comment from social media from Grimskull. What is this? A new host. Great seeing Abby hosting. Hello, Grimskull. Nice to see you. I am usually an associate producer. I'm sitting behind the scenes, working the teleprompter, but yes, I am on screen today. I even wore my fancy cut velvet, so I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. We have a new donation from Anonymous in Cork for €20. Thank you so much for donating to our Keep the Conversations Going campaign. Thank you to Grimskull from Evansville for the donation of €100. Oh, fantastic. We deeply appreciate all of your support over the past 3 days and since April 2020 when we began all this. It's been a wild ride, and we really want to keep the conversations going. Our next guest is Laura Ivers. She's an artist, director, and producer who has worked with Isaacs, Dublin Circus Project, and Clowns Without Borders. I am really excited to join her in conversation, and that'll be in 20 minutes. Go make a cup of tea, have a sandwich, maybe get into some comfy clothes or enjoy the sun, and we'll be back with you momentarily. Welcome back to our afternoon session of the Keep the Conversations Going Festival. I am delighted to welcome Laura Ivers, who is an artist, director, and producer. She's worked with Isaacs and Dublin Circus Project and Clowns Without Borders. She's currently working as an arts manager for Arts Council, started in the middle of the year. So I am so excited to welcome her on the program and chat about her work and life and what she's thinking about. So welcome, Laura. Hello.
Hi, Abby. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, great to have you. Obviously, we've been running these 3 days of festival, and we've had some brilliant conversations. And I have no doubt, after looking at the photos that you sent and just your experience, that we're going to get into some really exciting places. So welcome.
Thank you.
Will you tell me kind of about where you started? You're an artist, director, and producer. What came first? We are all
definitely. I started as a practitioner in circus arts. Is where it would have started. So my original education and background is in philosophy, and it was while I was doing my philosophy masters in Maynooth, I discovered circus arts there through the Circus Society in the college, and it was object manipulation that originally appealed to me. Obviously, circus arts encompasses a lot of different activities, including acrobatics and aerial arts and clowning and object manipulation. But it was juggling and hula hoop were the things that got me initially, and I just absolutely loved it. I became totally hooked on this constant push to be better, right? And it initially, what sparked my love of the art form was when I first learned. I learned a couple of things, and as a child, I could never hula hoop as a child. I just couldn't do it, and so I just assumed it was something I could never do. And then when I joined this society, and someone gave me a big, heavy weighted hula hoop, and it was a big, heavy one, kind of adult beginner one is what they're called, and it just worked. And I remember something clicked in my head. It was like a spark of electricity that went, wait a minute, if I can do this and I didn't believe that I could do it, does that mean that there's other things that I can't do that I can do that I didn't believe I could? And that really, it sent me on a journey. It sent me on a decade-long journey, I guess, of exploring circus arts and trying different things. And then I was quite lucky in that contemporary circus and circus practitioner in Ireland is relatively new for those not associated with traditional circus and traditional circus families. So things like schools or education programs for circus arts in Ireland are all blossoming at the moment. So when I got really into performing and practicing and developing my skills, and I traveled all around Ireland doing different workshops and training and learning and connecting and discovering this community. That's kind of how I very first got into doing it. And then I started getting booked for work and getting involved in collectives and producing shows and all of that good stuff is where it originally started for me.
Amazing. So do you remember the moment, the spark?
I remember the spark, yes.
Amazing. Would you tell me about some of those? Obviously, things are blossoming right now. And I know we had Lucy Medlicott on to chat about all of that and the work that she is doing, and the push for more representation, more funding, more acknowledgement from Ireland about the importance of circus, spectacle, street performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of mentioned just before we started the stream about street arts and how the arts are moving to the outdoor space now. So there's a lot of potential right now for that. So ISACS, the Irish Street Arts and Circus Network, which Lucy Medlicott is the CEO of, they're really at the forefront of pushing the professionalization and recognition for the sector, which is really brilliant work that they do. And what we're seeing now is things like residency programs and professionalization opportunities, creative intensives, all of this new language, this new framework, this new way of looking at circus arts in Ireland. And it's very much modelled off what we see across Europe, what we see in the UK as well, where they've been recognizing it as a respectable and valuable art form for some time and creating those kind of opportunities. But everything that we're doing now very much sits on the foundation that companies like Mockness, Spree, and Fidget Feet in particular have built over the last number of decades. We see a huge receptiveness from the Irish public on the streets to parades and spectacle events such as the Spree Festival in Waterford, which is a really high caliber, high quality presentation of street arts performance. And then the Mockness parades, which we've seen gracing the streets of Dublin and Galway for many, many years, as well as traveling internationally. It's really groundbreaking stuff that these companies are doing. So to start seeing the recognition of that at a funding level, but also to see the professionalization in the companies and the artists that are coming out of it, it's a pretty special time for the sector. So the Irish Street Arts and Circus Network, I got involved as a member initially, but then I joined their board for a number of years. So I was involved in supporting some of that development and supporting the work that they were doing. But what was really brilliant about that time for me was being able to get intimate with all of these artists and companies and understand the things that the challenges they were facing, and the opportunities that they had, the work that they were doing. Yeah, it's really brilliant, the sector, what's happening there.
Well, just from an audience point of view, any of the shows that I've seen via like screens of Fidget Feet's work, I remember catching How to Square a Circle and having my breath like caught, because that was Aisling and Ronan, I believe. That was just like just gorgeous, and something that like you kind of, there's such a world outside of a black box theater to explore and to perform in, and that's just brilliant.
Mm-hmm. One of the wonderful things about street performance and outdoor performance is how it democratizes the art form. There's no barriers. So you often see audiences side by side, all sorts of demographics. They're incredibly diverse audiences. There's usually no ticket price, which absolutely removes barriers for individuals as well. And then we're also starting to see this emergence of site-specific work, which is completely original in its nature. So you're seeing shows completely built around these outdoor spaces. For example, there's a company called Lucy Smokes who did a show a couple of years ago in the Fringe Festival called Behind the Dark. And it was really well reviewed, 5 stars in the Irish Times. And we don't get those kind of reviews in our sector. First of all, we don't get people reviewing us, but to see those kind of to see those kind of ratings coming out of it is very it's very special as well. But this particular show was completely built around this specific site in the Phoenix Park, using a multitude of trees and various different areas, and then using lighting and soundscapes and vertical dance on the trees, as well as aerial acrobatics and contortion, all built around this specific space. So we see a number of things like that continuing to happen. Just this last couple of weeks, Fidget Feet produced a new original show in Waterford on the Kilmacthomas Railway Bridge that involved, I think it was 8 aerial artists, all rigged off the side of the bridge and telling this really beautiful narrative about women's place in rural Ireland. And it was absolutely stunning, completely original, and the kind of thing that can be done in the outdoor space. So there we're seeing a combination of kind of spectacle street arts and circus combined in. So it's really, really special to see that kind of work. But most importantly, from my perspective, I think with street arts is the opportunity it has for making accessibility to the arts a lot broader.
I love that. The conversations with your audience and the outreach, it happens automatically in a way. You are there.
There, yeah.
You can't miss the performance and the excitement happening. I find that really interesting too, because we were just having a conversation with Dr. Sarah. Oh my goodness, Hoover, Dr. Sarah Hoover from NUIG. She's a PhD researcher, about how we all as artists and as audience bring in our own cultural identities, our own experiences into the space in which we see performance. So the idea that that net that you can cast is so much wider, on the street corner or off of a bridge, than you, and more accessible, than, you know, in a theater or in a space. It's just it's an excellent opportunity to reach new faces and new.
Yeah. And then just to give a nod to the spectacle side of it, so the more parade work, you would see Machnas, for example, making these really hugely impactful narratives that are told through street performance, costuming, music. The work that they do is so elevated. And then when they present these parades, it brings communities together on such an epic scale. You see a similar thing happening in Spree for the Spree weekend, where they have the street shows, and then also usually they finish the weekend with this massive original pageant, and their workshop is incredibly impressive. You walk in and you're surrounded by giant structures and wild creatures, and the caliber of everything is just so excellent. One wonderful thing about the Spree Festival, I think, where they commission some new work, and they will program street performance companies from across the world. And there's a really important distinction and evolution, I think, that has to happen within street performance from the perspective of educating Irish audiences. You see it in Waterford. All of these shows, there's never anybody asking you for money in the show, right? So I know you walk down Grafton Street and you catch a street performance, and that kind of format tends to be what we think of when we think of street performance. We think of a busker with unicycles and fire and lots of cheesy jokes and juggling, gathering in a crowd and building it all up so that they're going to do this big trick at the end. And that big trick, then just before they do it, they ask you for, they say, oh, remember, this is my job, and please put money in the hat. Now, I love that form. I love those shows, and I love the independence of these artists and the work that they do. I really, really love those shows. However, when you change the format so that the artist is given the space, given the funding, given the support in order to just make their art and present it on the streets, it changes the dynamic entirely. So the artists are able to actually spend time in rehearsals, asking themselves all of those questions you want to ask when you're creating a show or you're making work. Is, what do I want to say? What do I want to show? How do I want to interact with my audiences? Also, there tends not to be a fourth wall as well when you're working on the street. It tends to be the way in Circus as well, not exclusively, but it just tends to be there. You see your audience, you connect with them. That kind of element of clown and eye contact always comes into it. But what's really, really special is when you give the artists the space to create and to share the story that they want to tell without having to ask their audiences for money. It totally changes the quality of the output. It totally evolves that street performance work to a whole new level. And what you see in Waterford is these audiences who have been watching this kind of work for 30 years, this Spree Festival has been happening. Their expectation for the quality, their understanding and respect of the work, it's on an entire another level, and I'd love to see that kind of expanded across the country. I think Dublin audiences, we have the Grafton Street shows, the Henry Street shows, we have the City Spectacular, which tends to happen in Merrion Square, but all of those shows are always asking you for money, so they're always looking for something from you as an audience beyond just your attention. So there's a lot of space and there's a lot of scope, I think, for evolution there.
And do you think that is a specific what is the answer to that? Is it more funding? Is it more a wider breadth of schemes that folks can apply for? Is it the opportunities and the bookings? Is it governmental support? What do you think is holding it back? I mean, it is growing.
Yes, it is absolutely growing, and there are funds and schemes applicable towards those kind of things. But perhaps one thing I think that we do definitely need in the street arts, spectacle, and circus sectors is more arts managers, more producers, more experience in those areas to be able to create the space to present this work. So we do have quite a lot of emerging street performance companies, established street performance companies, and mostly they reach their audiences through getting bookings at established festivals. So a lot of it comes from that. It also comes from the bookers recognizing the value of this kind of work. But potentially also we need more street arts festivals. We need to see more street arts programming. And a part of that will probably come in relationships with city and town councils and recognizing, you know, it's when you change the street from just being a commercial space to being an artistic presentation space and that being officially supported and recognized, you start to see a shift in how people interact with those spaces. I think we've seen a shift in how, certainly in Dublin City, where I'm based, you see a shift in how the public are interacting with their streets simply based on designating areas to be outdoor and drink and food spaces. It's totally changed the vibe of the city, how people have interacted with it. So then if you start to establish these spaces for street performance of all kinds, and I don't just mean, you know, street arts as in our sector, what we would consider to be street arts, but also to see theatre and dance moved then to the streets as well. It'll totally change that dynamic. So I think a part of it is a recognition and education as to what it can be and the potential for street arts, and then you start to build the infrastructure around it with your managers and producers and people who are actually able to make the work happen, and then have residencies and funding and programs available for those artists to be able to create that work, specifically designing it for the street. Because you can't just take a black box show and put it on the street. There's all sorts of considerations that have to be taken into account there, from the weather to sound to the actual, like a dance show, you're not dealing with a stage, you're dealing with concrete or tarmac. So there's a lot of, you know, you have to actually give the space to that work to create it specifically for that space.
Definitely. It's absolutely fascinating, the amount of factors, I suppose, that go into making that both accessible and as a way of reaching new audiences. I'd love to move to we have some Clowns Without Borders images there. I would love to have you chat a little bit about how you got involved with Clowns Without Borders and the importance of that program.
Yeah, so Clowns Without Borders Ireland is a charity based in Ireland, run completely by volunteers, and it is part of a global network of Clowns Without Borders International, who all align with a shared vision, shared philosophy, shared approach to doing things, and their remit is to help to heal trauma from those who have experienced displacement, usually from war or from environmental factors, and to help to heal trauma among communities through laughter and through joy that's shared through circus and clown work. So I originally got involved with them because Ireland is a relatively small country, I'm sure, for many art forms, but for ours in particular can be. So a lot of professional circus artists in Ireland would be involved with Clowns Without Borders, or would have been to a fundraising event or shook a bucket on the streets in order to support this organization. So I gradually became more involved with them. And then I initially started volunteering with them from an administrational perspective. And then I began doing a bit of work as a performer with them as well, working with the Direct Provision Centre in Clondalkin. And then I supported in the tour planning and execution of a tour to Jordan, where we traveled to Jordan, and I think the first tour we reached around 3,500 young people, all of whom had been displaced from their homes, mostly in Syria, but some also from Iraq and Afghanistan, who had been taken into Jordan, which has a massive, massive community of refugees there. And we traveled to a number of different organizations. We would have partnered with the UNHCR and with various other organizations in Jordan, to go to various different refugee camps, in particular Zaatari and Azraq. I think Zaatari has something like 80,000 refugees in it. It's considered the second biggest city in Jordan now, I think, and it's very close to the Syrian border. So I was involved with organizing that tour. I was a member of that tour team. And then again, we did that a couple of years later with a different troupe of clowns and circus artists. I've always loved this photo. So a big part of clown is interaction with audiences and things like this. And this was a piece. We went around with feather dusters in the audience, and we had this whole skit about cleaning. So we would always try to engage with the UNHCR in advance of going and figure out what issues they were having in the camps. And often we were told that there would be themes of hygiene and self-care and various different things like that, which there would be issues with in the camp. So we would always try and integrate those things into the creation of our shows. So in this case, it was just a piece of audience interaction involving kind of going around cleaning everyone. And yeah, there's some beautiful moments in each of the shows. It can be quite a harrowing experience, actually. So this is good timing to put this one on. So this particular show was, I believe this was in Zaatari camp, and we were bussed in, and there was, I think, particularly about 500 young men at this particular show. And as you can see, it was a dust storm at the time. It's just tents. And here my colleague Tony Mahon's an excellent performer. Circus artist and producer. Here he's doing a kind of skit, an old man skit with some balloons and things. And you can see them all gathered around. They came from all over the camp to come watch these shows. And you can see, it's really harrowing when you see the environments that they're in, but then it's really rewarding when you see that, you've given them something that has helped them. And often we get feedback from, or we did get feedback from various family members, community members in the camps, saying that their kids were coming back home and they're acting out the shows and singing the songs from the shows. And we've even got some very touching comments over time from people talking about how it was the first time they'd seen their child laugh in a number of months and various things like that. A lot of the work that we do in Clowns Without Borders is based on research originally done by the Red Cross, showing the laughter and bringing these kind of shows to bring the communities together can have really profound healing effects when someone has gone through severe trauma. There's another, I think this is that original, the same show in Zaatari camp, this one, and it was such a grim day, super, really stormy, and as I said, it was hundreds of kids gathered around to watch the show. So even just looking at the pictures, it brings back so many different memories. Yeah, it's a really fabulous organization, and they've done tours to various different countries over the years, including Calais in Greece, Jordan, Iraq, and they continue to do work. So I did those 2 tours with them, and then I volunteered for a long time on their board and with doing some administration and kind of the website development and all of those kind of things. Here was my original tour that I went on, and it was 4 women on this show, so that was quite an experience in and of itself. And that was in Azraq refugee camp in their community support area, where it's all painted really colourful. So which is quite an interesting contrast to the last picture in Zaatari. So you see all of this work that these amazing aid organisations are doing to try and support these people completely displaced. They've lost everything. They've lost their homes. They've lost their communities. In many cases, they've lost family members. So we would work, and often we would come across Medicine Sans Frontier and these other organizations that are out there. We're not doctors, we're clowns, but we can do what we can do, and we've seen massive impacts of it, and the feedback we get is just phenomenal. So for anyone who's listening who's interested in Clowns Without Borders, I'd recommend just going to cwbireland.com, I think it's .com, or checking them out on Facebook, on social media. There's donate buttons there, anything you can do to help, and they're always looking for volunteers as well to help in various ways with whatever they can offer. It's a really, really brilliant organization. Yeah.
Just reminds you how much art is necessary in the worst of times and how healing it can be.
Yes, and to snap someone out of the environment that they're in as well, even for that temporary period, that suspension of disbelief, the suspension of reality for those few moments, it can be really, really impactful. Yeah.
Can I ask kind of a hard question? I'm interested to see if I'm interested to hear, is there any resistance to groups like Clowns Without Borders traveling internationally? I'm sure that depends on the country you're going to, but clearly they were enjoying themselves, enjoying the performance is what I mean, and able to escape their world or the reality for a few moments. And I would hope that wouldn't be resisted.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the administration bit of that?
Yeah. So I mentioned originally the kind of the partnerships that we would have internationally, and that's the strongest foundation. That's the most important piece of it, really, because it is, as you say, there could be resistance and it could be very difficult to just turn up. You know, you can't just turn up with a clown nose and a suitcase on the outside of a refugee camp and expect to be let in, because there's a safeguarding that has to be considered as well, particularly when you're working with children. So the original, and it was Payasos Sans Frontiers, I think the original founder of Clowns Without Borders was a Spanish man, and he did just that. He just took his clown nose and his suitcase and he walked to Palestine. And he basically, the entire ethos of the organization is founded on that. But in today's world, that approach, it's not a safe one for the artists. It's not a safe approach for the audiences either. So it very much comes down to the partnerships that you have in place. And so it would be about making those strong connections with the various different aid organizations that are in place, UNHCR in particular, Oxfam, and all of these different organizations that are in place there, to connect with those, and then together you would work with them to connect with the relevant individuals inside the camps or at the orphanages or at the schools that you were going to visit, and you would build a tour then based on that. So they have the inside knowledge, and they also then, you know, when you get there that you're mostly going to be welcomed. In a lot of these cases, you got, 4 Irish people turning up, you stick out like a sore thumb. It's even regardless of any circus equipment or colorful costumes that you have. So there, there's always a bit of wariness about strangers, but when people realized what we were doing and what our purposes there were, people instantly warmed to us. Particularly in Jordan. Jordan is and from my personal experience, Jordan is a very open country. Jordan is a very welcoming country, and they very much support refugees there, and they understand they've had such massive influx of refugees that they're very much used to the aid organizations and the different kind of work that can be done there. So, and also you would always, in terms of organizing the tours, you would always have a driver and that little support network in place for the team itself while they're over there. And our teams always have a highly experienced member who's been on a number of tours already, and then maybe 1 or 2 new performers in each group. So there's always a strong foundation of support there.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. It's got me a little emotional just thinking about the joy of that.
Just talking about it and looking at the pictures has me a little emotional too. Yeah, it's harrowing, but also incredibly rewarding. Yeah, and it can be a very intense tour as well. You're doing 3 shows a day, traveling for hours in really high temperatures and barren landscapes, and and you're rocking up in your little van into these really extreme environments, very extreme environments. And so you're looking around and you're impacted by this as an individual and as a human, but then you got to go put your game face on. You got to be ready to deliver a show, and you're bringing heart and soul in everything that you do. So it's quite unlike any performance that I've ever done. It's a very special kind of work. And the board and all of the volunteers in Clowns Without Borders are so dedicated to the work that they do. Everyone's hearts are in it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, would you talk about how that experience has affected your personal work and the sort of work you want to create?
Yeah. it's hard to put a finger on it, but it has changed. It has changed me. It's changed my approach to work forever, definitely. A big part of it for me was how many people we met during that time, how the size of the audiences, how many children we came across, you know, and the different environments of it. It certainly led me to always try and inject meaning into the work that I'm doing. So with circus arts, I mean, you can just turn up and you can do your tricks and you can bow and you can leave. But contemporary circus, it tends to want to elevate that, whether it's through integrating other art forms like theatre and dance and philosophies from that into your work. But in terms of the Clowns Without Borders work, it's led me to want to have high levels of authenticity in what I'm doing, high levels of heart, and always to try and have a sense of meaning in the work that I'm doing. It mostly affected me on a life level and personal level for life to, you know, so when I see things on the news now, they're a lot more personal. You know, I've been to these places, I've met these people, and it's not just an abstract thing that's happening, you know, somewhere else in the world. It's, you know, these are my family as well. Now it feels like, in a way. So that's highly impactful. And it's also, it's brought a lot more openness and heart to me in my life and how I interact with people. Generally, it's not so clear to pinpoint perhaps how it maybe has affected my work directly, because some of the work that I would produce and direct isn't necessarily clown. I would work with other approaches to circus arts. I see you bringing up some photos there. This is that particular one is a show called Prometheus that we did with Dublin Circus Project. I think it was 2014 or 2015. That was I think we had about 15 performers in that. It was a fire spectacle that we presented in Trinity College. I think the audience was about I think when we counted the audience was about 2,500 turned up. It was a free street event that we put on as part of the Dublin Circus Festival at the time, which isn't running anymore. It was a flagship event. And that was one of the shows that we did as part of that. That was inspired by the story of Prometheus and the people stealing the fire from the gods. So it was quite a wonderful show. It was brilliant. So in terms of how this is a clown character that I have myself, kind of clown drag character who I do performances with. It's a gentleman juggler type character. So there's a bit of clown in that. But in terms of kind of connecting the philosophies of Clowns Without Borders with my personal work, it's more so it's something that I've integrated very much into myself and how I interact with the world. I would say more so necessarily than it having directly influenced my own production and directorial work. This is a contemporary circus theatre show that I directed and produced that was called Poe. So we had a collective of artists, about 12, 13 artists, who all came together and we collaborated to put together various scenes and different segments that were all influenced by different pieces of Poe's work. This was The Pit and the Pendulum, which is a story about a man being tortured and eaten alive by rats and things like that. It's very not quite fun. This was also a piece from Poe. This was a segment, a biographical segment actually about Poe and his young wife who died very young. So this piece was The Death of Victoria, a partner acrobatic piece. So there are elements of clown do come into some of the work that I do, but my own personal kind of tastes tend to be a little bit darker, I guess. This is a shot from one of my solo acts, which is an isolation hoop piece. So it's with smaller white hoops, and you isolate them through space to kind of give certain visual effects. I think this is from 2014, some time ago. Yeah.
Very cool. Oh my goodness. They're also
and this was sorry, go on.
Just dramatic. Like there is such a space in each of these. And the movement that you get from it, you just go ahead.
Yeah, this was another kind of Halloween themed show we did. This particular piece was about a werewolf, which is quite good. I just always loved this shot, I think. So the integration of kind of audio visual and projection work into the act as well, on top of simply just delivering the skill with a virtuoso approach, you know, like, ta-da, here are the tricks that I'm doing, and here is the skill, ta-da, now applause me. Try and integrate narrative and audiovisual and soundscapes into that. And this is one of the outcomes of that. This particular piece is an artist called Theo Mooney.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, so we were talking earlier about essentially the structures that need to be put in place and the supports that can help bring work to audiences. And I was struck by the fact that you were saying the accessibility of street arts in particular lends itself to be that forerunner in the I suppose the fight to grow audiences, the fight to share the work. And I think that is so important to recognize. That is the fire and the spark that could ignite a love of performance and theater and art.
Yes, absolutely. I think I used the term earlier. It kind of democratizes the arts. I think when you put them on the streets, you remove any ticketing barriers. They're just there. There's also the chance for audiences to just discover them as well, to just come along and discover something and be drawn in by it. You don't have to go and seek it out. It comes to you, I think is important as well. When it comes to street arts, I think now we have a very unique opportunity post-pandemic where we're moving to an outdoor world, for it to be a more recognized thing as an art form, particularly. And we can look at, as for example, Outdoor Arts UK is quite an established organization similar to Isaac's. And there was an event that they collaborated on recently, which was a symposium where we were examining various ways to approach street arts. And I think a part of it is looking at these factors, looking at what is unique about it, what do we need to think about, how do we think about it as an art form in order to kind of make it successful, make it be taken more seriously, perhaps. And some of these things are the unique elements of it that need to be considered. You know, you don't have this controlled environment. So for example, your season then is very limited for outdoor arts. You're kind of talking, you know, of the Irish sector, the season kind of kicks off in earnest with St. Patrick's Day, where you've got outdoor pageant and parade events all across the country, and then leading up maybe till around Halloween. But after that point, it's quite difficult to do outdoor arts. So you've got to think about all of these different factors. You've got to think about the weather. You've got to think about the sound. You've got to think about lighting, particularly for an outdoor space, and you've got to have, you know, professionals in the sector who can see the potential for that and who can bring their expertise from perhaps indoor to outdoor and all of those considerations. But most importantly, you need to be given the space to present it. The streets need to be made available for this.
With the threat of some of the pedestrianization in Dublin City being taken away too, it's especially critical that we take a stand and tell them that it's actually changed the environment.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, people often say, how do you get certain demographics, or how do you get different people to engage with things like theatre or engage with things with opera? You bring it to them, you put it on their street, you know. I think if there's communities who traditionally don't engage with these kind of art forms, you should bring it to them, put it on the streets outside their houses. I think is a really brilliant way to do it, to build audiences through exposure. So we have to give them opportunities for exposure. If we're constantly locking things away inside buildings with tickets and security guards, no one's ever going to be able to access it.
We need to be aware of those gatekeepers. Well,
yeah.
I would love to just chat. We're just about to wrap up. We've chatted for a good while now. It's been absolutely delightful. Would you like to talk about what is on your mind? Obviously, we've covered a lot, but is there anything that's like niggling away there?
It is that question of the streets. It is that question. It's especially right now. How do we make it more appealing, attractive to artists and creatives to see the street as a stage, and to really spend time in these environments, that site-specific work, knock down the walls of the black box in a way, and bring it to the people. So that's one thing that's definitely on my mind. And like you mentioned, the threat of removing the pedestrianisation from Dublin, those kind of things are definitely on my mind. They'd be quite troublesome to me. I as I spend a lot of time in Europe as well, and you see those streets, they're full of people, they're full of life, things happen outdoor on the streets, whereas we very much have this culture of things happening inside, in the public houses, in the bars. That's where the culture lives, as opposed to it being outside on the streets and accessible to everybody, and fostering community among different demographics. So that's definitely something that's on my mind.
I feel like that's an excellent point to leave on, or to end this conversation on. It's left us with a lot to think about.
So thank you very much for the chat, and
it was absolutely delightful.
On your weekends.
Thank you so much. This was just a pleasure to hear about your career, your work, and what is needed to keep pushing forward with both street art and performance, and the reaching out to new audiences.
Mm-hmm. And I'd highly recommend that anyone who's listening is more interested in any of this stuff, that they check out isaacs.ie. So ISACS, isaacs.ie. It's the Irish Street Arts and Circus Network. And you mentioned Lucy Medlicott earlier. She's their wonderful CEO. But they have some really brilliant articles and content, and you can explore the different members who are active in the sector right now. And it's I think there's an opportunity for people from all art forms to start to engage with street arts in a different way, and to create work for street arts presentation, not simply just indoors. So I think there's a brilliant opportunity there. And then of course, Clowns Without Borders, CWB Ireland, they are on the social medias and their website. Highly recommend that people check them out. If you can, donate a couple of euro. It'll go directly towards supporting artists to work with young people who've been displaced. So, yes.
We'll make sure to link those in the comment description after the show, and we'll also put them on our social media.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll definitely be talking to you soon.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Take care. Wow, that was an excellent conversation. Thank you so much to Laura Ivers for joining us. We are going to take a short break for our, and then we'll come back with a episode. Well, not an episode. Oh goodness, I'm just blown away by that conversation. Come back, and we will be. We'll have a panel discussion at 7 p.m. with a whole host of delightful guests. So stay tuned. We'll be starting another stream, I believe, and you won't want to miss it. While we're here, though, take a moment to share this stream with your friends and followers. Make sure when you join at 7 to share the stream. Share our campaign to keep the conversations going with your social media friends and colleagues. And we will be back shortly.